Have you ever smiled at a dinner table while your chest felt like it was splitting open and no one noticed? That's exactly how my Christmas began. The lights were soft, the tree was glowing, someone was laughing too loudly at a joke that wasn't even funny, and I was holding a small wrapped box in my hands like it carried something fragile. It did, not expensive, not flashy, just meaningful. I waited until the plates were half empty and the wine had warmed their faces. I cleared my throat softly, haha, nervous for no reason, and said I had something small for her. She smiled that tight smile she always uses in photos. My son didn't look up from his phone right away. I handed her the box. She tore the paper quickly, not careful, not curious. When she opened it, she blinked once, then laughed. "This," she said, tilting it like it might stain her fingers. "This cheap thing," and before I could even breathe properly, she let it fall. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp little crack. Forks paused. Someone let out an awkward chuckle. My son said nothing, not a word, not even hey, not even be nice, just silence. That silence was louder than the sound of it hitting the floor. I felt heat rush up my neck. I bent down slowly, my knees not what they used to be, sigh, and picked it up. It hadn't broken. Funny how strong things can be when people assume they're weak. I brushed it off gently and slipped it back into the box. No one apologized. Conversation resumed like nothing had happened. Someone passed the mashed potatoes. Someone joked about the weather. And I sat there, hands folded in my lap, pretending I didn't feel my throat tightening. I told myself not to cry, not here, not in front of her, but when I looked at my son and he still wouldn't meet my eyes, something inside me cracked. It wasn't about the gift. It was never about the gift. It was about respect. It was about being seen. I had spent weeks choosing that piece. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't designer. It was restored, polished, repaired. It carried history. I thought maybe she would understand meaning. I was wrong. Dessert came. Laughter grew louder. She was showing photos of a resort on her phone, talking about upgrades and future plans. My son leaned into her, smiling like the moment hadn't happened. I excused myself quietly and went to the bathroom. I locked the door and leaned against it. That's when the tears came, not dramatic sobbing, just silent, steady weeping. I turned on the faucet so no one would hear. "It's fine," I whispered to myself. "It's just a thing," but deep down I knew it wasn't. I stayed in there longer than necessary. When I came back, no one asked where I'd been. Of course they didn't. I sat back down. I didn't eat dessert. I didn't speak again. When I finally stood to leave, she called out sweetly, "Drive safe," as if she hadn't just laughed at something that mattered to me. My son walked me to the door, but even then, he didn't mention it. He just hugged me lightly and said, "Don't overthink it, don't overthink it." Haha, that almost made me laugh. The cold air outside hit my face and I breathed in slowly. I didn't feel angry yet. I felt clear. That's worse. When I got home, I hung my coat carefully and placed the box on my kitchen counter. I opened it again. I held the gift in my hands. It was still beautiful, still ticking softly, still working. I traced its edges with my thumb. "Cheap," she had said. "Cheap." I made tea but didn't drink it. I sat at the table in the quiet and stared at the wall. Memories replayed, her laugh, the way it fell, my son's silence. Silence can bruise deeper than words. I wasn't crying anymore. That part was done. Now something else was rising, not rage, not yet, just awareness. I walked to the drawer where I keep my documents. I don't know why I opened it at that moment. Maybe instinct. Maybe habit. I pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of things I had signed over the years, car registrations, insurance papers, titles. I flipped through them slowly. My name, my signature, my ownership, the BMW. I remembered the day I helped them get it. She had posted pictures. "Manifesting blessings," she wrote. I had smiled at the time. I wanted them to feel supported, loved. I never transferred the title. Funny, isn't it? They drove it every day. They acted like it was theirs, but on paper it wasn't. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long sigh. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about balance, about consequences. About what happens when kindness is mistaken for weakness. I picked up my phone and stared at it. I didn't dial yet, not tonight. Tonight was about understanding something important. I had been generous without limits. I had been silent without boundaries, and tonight in front of everyone she tested how far that silence could stretch. My son helped her test it. They assumed I would swallow it, smile, move on. But as I sat there in my quiet kitchen, listening to the soft ticking in my hands, I realized something very simple. I don't argue, I adjust. And by morning, something in their driveway would not be there anymore. Do you know what's strange about heartbreak? It keeps you awake, but not in a dramatic way, not tossing and turning, not staring at the ceiling whispering, "Why me?" No, it keeps you awake in a quiet, focused way. Like your mind suddenly becomes very organized. That night I didn't sleep. I didn't cry again either. The tears had done their job. Now came something colder. I sat at my kitchen table with the folder still open in front of me. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the gift she called cheap. I let that sound fill the room. Tick, 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 strong, steady, unbothered. Funny how something thrown on the floor could still keep perfect time. I poured myself fresh tea, even though the last cup had gone untouched. I wasn't thirsty, I was thinking, have you ever reached that point where something inside you just shifts, not anger, not revenge, just clarity? I opened the BMW file again, registration certificate, insurance, purchase agreement, my name printed neatly across every page, only mine. I remembered standing at the dealership. She was filming on her phone, laughing, calling it our new baby. My son had hugged me that day. You didn't have to do this, he said. I believed he meant it. Maybe he did, but intention fades quickly when comfort settles in. I traced my signature slowly. I had never transferred ownership. I had meant to eventually. I told myself I would once they were more stable, once they showed responsibility, once I felt respected. I laughed softly at that, respect. It's funny how we expect it to grow automatically just because we are family. It doesn't, it has to be taught, and sometimes it has to be enforced. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. I replayed Christmas dinner again. The sound of it hitting the floor, her laugh, my son's silence. The silence bothered me more now than the insult. If he had said, hey, that's not okay, everything would have been different, but he didn't, and silence is agreement. That realization hurt more than the rest. I stood up and walked to the window. The street was empty, frost beginning to form on car roofs. Somewhere 12 minutes away, that BMW was parked outside their condo. Warm. Safe, taken for granted. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking account, not because I needed to, because I wanted to remind myself of something. Every down payment, every transfer, every gift. I had never kept score. I never said, remember this. I believe generosity spoke for itself. I was wrong. Generosity without boundaries becomes expectation, and expectation becomes entitlement. I closed the banking tab and opened my contacts list. I scrolled down slowly. Tow service, still saved from years ago when my old car broke down on the highway. I stared at the number. My finger hovered. Not yet, timing matters. I went back to the folder and pulled out the insurance policy. Primary holder me, authorized drivers, both of them. Authorization can be removed. Ownership cannot be argued. The law is simple. Paper does not care about feelings. I sat back down and let out a slow breath. Cheap, she had said. Cheap. I picked up the gift again and held it in my palm. It felt solid, weighty, real. I whispered softly, you're not cheap. And maybe I wasn't talking about the gift anymore. Maybe I was talking about myself. Around 3 a.m. I finally made the call. My voice was calm. The man on the other end was professional. I explained that I needed a vehicle retrieved. Yes, legally registered to me. Yes, I could provide documentation. Yes, early morning would be best. 8 o'clock am confirmed. I wrote the time down on a sticky note and placed it beside the folder. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I thought I would shake. I thought I would hesitate, but no. When something breaks cleanly, you don't wobble, you adjust. Before closing the folder, I added one more thing. I opened my phone and scrolled back to the photo she had posted months ago. Her standing in front of the BMW, sunglasses on, caption about blessings and hard work. Haha, I almost smiled at that. Hard work. I screenshotted it, not for revenge, for memory. So I would never doubt what I saw tonight. I placed the phone face down and stood up. Dawn was beginning to lighten the sky, pale blue creeping in. I felt tired now, but not weak, focused, tired. The kind you feel after finishing something important. I washed my cup and dried it carefully. I am not reckless. I don't scream. I don't argue at dinner tables. I don't throw words like knives. I make adjustments, small ones. Legal ones, final ones, and tomorrow morning when she steps outside with her coffee in one hand and her phone in the other, ready to start her day, something will feel different. At first, she won't understand. She'll blink, look around. Press her key fob again, maybe laugh nervously. My son will step out behind her, confused, and that will be the moment they realize something important. I am not sentimental. I am not helpless. I am not a background character in their story. I am the owner, and by the time the sun fully rises, the driveway will be empty, and so will my patience. Have you ever watched something happen from a distance and felt completely calm, even though you knew it would shake someone else's world? That morning, I didn't rush. I didn't stand by the window like some villain in a movie. I made coffee. I buttered toast. I even turned on the radio softly, the kind of old song that makes you sigh without knowing why. 8:03 a.m. My phone buzzed once. Tow service confirming arrival. I replied with a simple thank you. That was it. No drama, no long speech, just paperwork meeting reality. I imagined her stepping outside, robe half-tied, phone in hand. I imagined her pressing the button. Once, twice, maybe 3 times, that little beep echoing in an empty space. Silence where metal should be. My son would come out next, confused, scratching his head like problems solve themselves if you look puzzled enough. I didn't need to see it. I already knew how it would unfold. At 8:19, my phone buzzed again, a text from my son. Mom, did something happen to the car? I stared at it for a long moment. No accusation, just confusion. Interesting. 5 seconds later, another message. The BMW is gone. I took a slow sip of coffee before replying. It wasn't gone, it was retrieved. 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, appeared again. What do you mean retrieved? He asked. I let a full minute pass. Timing matters, it's registered to me, I wrote. I made one call. My chest didn't pound, my hands didn't shake, I felt steady. That surprised me. Another message popped up, but this time it wasn't him, it was her. Is this some kind of joke? She wrote. No greeting, no respect, still that same tone. I almost laughed, haha, but it came out more like a quiet breath through my nose. A joke, yes, like throwing someone's gift on the floor is a joke. Like laughing in front of family is a joke. I didn't respond to her, not yet. My son called. I watched the screen light up and let it ring once, twice, 3 times before answering. Mom, his voice sounded strained. Why would you do this without talking to us? I leaned back in my chair. You didn't talk to me last night either, I said gently. Silence on the other end, that kind of silence that feels heavy. It was just a misunderstanding, he said finally. She didn't mean it like that. I closed my eyes and pictured the box hitting the floor. It wasn't about the object, I replied. It was about respect. He sighed loudly. This is extreme, extreme. That word rolled around in my mind. Is it extreme to reclaim what belongs to you, or is it extreme to publicly humiliate someone who helped you? I didn't say that. I kept my voice even. The car is safe, I told him. So am I. He didn't answer right away. I could hear her in the background asking questions sharply. I imagined her pacing, imagined her realizing something important. That things she assumed were hers weren't. Can we talk about this? He asked quietly. We are talking, I said. No, in person. I considered it. Not today, I replied. Today I need you to think. That hurt him. I could hear it. But sometimes discomfort is the only teacher that works. I ended the call gently, not abruptly. I don't slam doors, I close them properly. My phone buzzed again. This time her message was longer. You embarrassed us. Do you know how this looks? Neighbors were watching. This is childish. Childish. I stared at that word for a long time. I typed, erased, typed again, then I sent only one sentence. So was Christmas. I set the phone face down after that. I didn't need to continue. I didn't need to argue. They would feel it now. Not pain, not harm, just consequence. I stood up and walked to the shelf where I had placed the gift. I held it again. It was still ticking softly, strong. Reliable, unlike people who forget who supported them. I whispered, you're on your own now. Not in anger, not in hatred, just in truth, because independence is not punishment, it is responsibility. Around noon, my son texted again. She's really upset. I didn't reply. Being upset is not the same as being wronged. Later he sent, can we at least get the car back temporarily? She has meetings. I smiled faintly. Meetings. Life doesn't stop when you lose something borrowed, it adjusts, just like I did. I didn't answer that one either. Instead, I opened my folder once more and double-checked everything. Insurance updated, authorization removed, done, clean. Legal final. By evening the messages slowed down. Shock fades into realization. Realization turns into understanding. And understanding, well, that's where growth begins. I turned off the lights in my living room and stood by the window for a moment. The street was quiet again, nothing dramatic, no sirens, no chaos, just stillness. Funny how one small phone call can shift the balance of an entire relationship. But here's the part they didn't see coming. Taking the car back wasn't the main lesson. It was only the beginning. Have you ever had that quiet feeling in your stomach that something wasn't just careless but planned, that maybe the laugh wasn't spontaneous, it was measured? The car was gone, the shock had settled, the messages had slowed. But something inside me still felt unsettled. Not angry, not guilty, just alert. That kind of alertness you feel when you realize you may have ignored signs for too long. I wasn't looking for more drama. I was actually hoping that was the end of it, a harsh lesson, a reset, done, but life rarely stops where we want it to. Around mid-afternoon my phone buzzed again. It wasn't my son, it wasn't her, it was Darcy. She and my daughter-in-law had been friends for years. Brunch partners, spa partners, the kind of friends who talk freely when they think no one important is listening. The message was simple. I think you should hear this. There was an audio file attached, no explanation, just that sentence. My chest tightened slightly. I sat down before pressing play. I don't know why, maybe instinct, maybe preparation. I pressed it. At first there was background noise, dishes clinking, soft music, people talking, then her voice, clear, relaxed, laughing. She won't even notice, she said. My breath caught. I didn't move, I didn't blink. Once everything is in his name, we'll upgrade. I'm not staying in that condo forever. Someone asked something I couldn't hear clearly. She laughed again. She's emotional, that's her weakness. Emotional weakness. I felt something shift inside my chest, but it wasn't pain this time. It was confirmation. All those small moments I brushed aside, the eye rolls, the subtle comments, the way she spoke over me at dinner, they lined up in my mind like puzzle pieces finally snapping together. This wasn't a Christmas slip, this was strategy. She wasn't reacting, she was calculating. I let the audio continue. The car's practically ours anyway, she said lightly. It's just paperwork, just paperwork. I almost smiled at that. Paperwork is not just anything. Paperwork is ownership. Paperwork is protection. Paperwork is power. When the recording ended, I didn't replay it immediately. I just sat there in silence. No tears. No shaking, just a long exhale. So that's what she thought of me. Emotional, weak, blind. It wasn't the insult that hurt. It was the assumption that I wouldn't check, that I wouldn't act, that I wouldn't notice. I pressed play again. This time I listened to her tone, not the words, the tone, confident, certain. She wasn't hoping, she was planning. That laugh at Christmas, it wasn't awkward, it was testing. How far could she push? Would I respond? Would my son defend me? She learned something that night, but she learned the wrong lesson. My phone buzzed again while I was still holding it, a text from my son. She says you're overreacting, she didn't mean it. I stared at that message for a long moment. Then I typed slowly, she meant exactly what she said. I didn't mention the recording, not yet. Information is powerful when used at the right time. I forwarded the audio to my lawyer with one sentence. Please archive this. 2 minutes later, he replied, received. That was enough. I set the phone down and walked to the sink. I rinsed a clean glass just to feel the water over my hands. Funny how calm I felt, you'd expect rage. Screaming, dramatic music in the background. No, just stillness. The kind of stillness that comes when doubt disappears. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't sensitive, I wasn't imagining disrespect. It was real, intentional, structured. And suddenly the car felt small. This was bigger than a vehicle. This was about protection, about boundaries, about making sure my generosity never again became someone else's stepping stone. My son called again. I let it ring once before answering. Mom, this is getting out of control, he said quickly. She's saying you're trying to punish us. I leaned back in my chair. Punishment is emotional, I replied softly. This is correction. Silence. Then he said something that made me pause. She thought you'd never actually do anything. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was. The truth slipped out without him realizing. That, I said quietly, was her mistake. He didn't argue this time, he just sounded tired. Can we fix this? He asked. Fix. That word used to mean compromise to me, now it meant clarity. This isn't broken, I said. It's revealing. We ended the call without resolution, but resolution wasn't the goal anymore. Understanding was. I walked back to the shelf and picked up the gift again. It was still ticking, still steady. I smiled faintly. She thought I was emotional. She thought emotion meant weakness. She forgot something important. Emotional people feel deeply, but they also remember deeply, and when they decide to act, they do it completely. I placed the gift back down carefully and whispered to myself, almost amused, you tested the wrong person. And that's when I realized something even she hadn't considered yet. The BMW was only the first thing connected to my name. Have you ever noticed how quickly respect appears once access disappears? The BMW was gone, yes, that shook them, but what really unsettled them wasn't the empty driveway, it was the shift in control. And I hadn't even finished adjusting things yet. The next morning felt strangely peaceful. No dramatic thoughts, no anger bubbling up, just quiet focus. I made breakfast, opened my laptop, and logged into my accounts. Not to snoop, to review. There's a difference. When you've spent years supporting someone, you don't need to spy. You already know where the roots are. I clicked into the joint business account I had helped her open 3 years ago. I still remembered the day clearly. She had hugged me, almost teary, saying how grateful she was. I couldn't have started this without you, she said back then, and I believed her. I transferred seed money. I signed as secondary guarantor. I didn't ask for ownership. I didn't ask for recognition. I trusted. That word feels heavy now. Trust. It's beautiful when it's mutual, dangerous when it's one-sided. I scrolled through the transaction history slowly. The business had grown. Orders, deposits, payments, good for her. Truly, I never wanted her to fail. But here's what she misunderstood. Support is not surrender. My name was still attached, my authorization still active, my access still real. And access can be removed just as easily as it was granted. I leaned back in my chair and asked myself one simple question. Was I doing this out of spite? I sat with that honestly. If the answer had been yes, I would have stopped. But it wasn't. This wasn't about revenge, it was about boundaries. She called me emotional, weak, blind. Fine, emotional people protect themselves too. I picked up my phone and called the bank. My voice was steady. I'd like to remove my secondary authorization and revoke joint access privileges on the business account, I said clearly. The woman on the line asked security questions. I answered without hesitation. She confirmed the change. Effective immediately, she said politely. Immediate. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I logged back in and initiated the transfer of my original investment amount, nothing extra, just what had come from me. The screen asked, "Are you sure?" I almost laughed at that. Yes, I was sure. I clicked confirm. 3 seconds later, the balance adjusted. Clean, precise, no drama. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Her name flashed across the screen. I didn't answer. It buzzed again, then a message. Something's wrong with the account. I let it sit. Another message. Orders aren't processing. Then, did you change something? I exhaled slowly, not in anger, just awareness. This is what consequence feels like when it's unfamiliar. A few minutes later, my son called. I answered this time. Mom, the business account froze. She can't access funds. Clients are complaining. His voice sounded tense, not furious. Just pressured, it didn't freeze, I replied calmly. I removed myself. Silence. But why now? He asked. That question almost made me smile. Why now? As if timing had nothing to do with Christmas. As if laughter on hardwood floors didn't echo. Because I realized something, I said gently. Support without respect is permission to be used. He sighed heavily. This feels extreme. That word again, extreme. Funny how accountability feels extreme when you're not used to it. I didn't touch what she earned, I continued. I removed what I contributed. He didn't respond immediately. I could hear muffled conversation in the background. Her voice sharp, frustrated, then he said quietly, she says you're trying to sabotage her. I closed my eyes briefly. Sabotage, such a dramatic word for something so legal. If her business collapses because I withdrew my own funds, I replied evenly, then it wasn't stable to begin with. That stung him, I could hear it, but truth isn't cruelty, it's clarity. After we ended the call, I placed my phone face down and walked outside for fresh air. The sky was pale and still. No thunder, no lightning, just normal life continuing. And that's the thing about quiet power, it doesn't look loud. It looks ordinary. Later that afternoon, her social media page posted something vague about unexpected financial adjustments and learning hard lessons. I watched from a distance. No reaction, no comment. I don't fight publicly, I adjust privately. Around evening, my phone buzzed again. A message from my son, can we please sit down and talk? This is spiraling. Spiraling, I thought about that word carefully. Things don't spiral when they are exposed, they spiral when they are built on assumption, and assumption is what brought us here. Before I respond to him, I want to say something to you. If you're listening to this and you've ever been made to feel small in your own generosity, don't forget to protect yourself. And if stories like this remind you that quiet strength matters, make sure you're subscribed. There are more truths people don't talk about openly. Now back to them. I typed one sentence to my son, come tomorrow morning, alone. I didn't add anything else, I didn't explain. Some conversations require space. And space is exactly what they were about to feel, because removing the car was noticeable, removing access was uncomfortable, but what I was about to say face to face, that would change everything. Have you ever looked at someone you raised and suddenly realized they're a stranger? That's how it felt when he knocked on my door the next morning. Just one knock, not rushed, not angry, just uncertain. I opened the door slowly. He was standing there with his hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, like he used to stand when he knew he'd done something wrong as a teenager. For a second, I almost saw that boy again. Awe that nearly broke me. But I steadied myself. Come in, I said softly. He stepped inside without arguing. No car keys in his hand this time. That detail didn't escape me. I made coffee automatically. Habit is stronger than emotion sometimes. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the surface like it might give him answers. We didn't speak for a full minute. The silence wasn't hostile, it was heavy. She's really upset, he said finally. Not I'm sorry, not that wasn't right, just that. I nodded once. I imagine she is. He looked up at me, frustrated. Mom, you could have just talked to us. I leaned back in my chair and folded my hands calmly. I did talk, I replied. At Christmas, I talked with my silence. He flinched slightly at that. Good, let it sit, let it echo. He ran a hand through his hair. She didn't mean to insult you like that. I tilted my head gently. Then what did she mean? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked tired, really tired. It was awkward. She laughs when she's uncomfortable. I almost smiled at that excuse. She seemed very comfortable, I said quietly. He sighed loudly. You're making this bigger than it was. Bigger, there's that word again. I leaned forward slightly. No, I said gently but firmly. I'm responding exactly to what it was. His jaw tightened. It was a gift, he said. You don't take someone's car over a gift. I held his gaze. It wasn't about the gift. Silence, the air shifted. Then what is it about? He asked, and there it was, the real question. I took a slow breath. It's about standing in a room full of people while someone laughs at you and your own son says nothing. His eyes dropped immediately. That hit, I saw it land. Good, he swallowed hard. I didn't want to cause a scene, he muttered. She already did, I replied calmly. He didn't argue that part. Instead, he rubbed his temples. She feels attacked, he said softly. I let out a quiet sigh. Being corrected isn't an attack. We sat there in silence again. This time it wasn't heavy, it was processing. He finally looked at me, and for the first time since he walked in, his voice lost its defensiveness. Did you really think I was okay with it? He asked. I held his eyes. You were okay enough to stay silent. That hurt him. I could see it. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a moment. I didn't know it meant that much to you. That sentence almost made me laugh, but it came out as a soft breath instead. That's the problem, I said. You didn't ask. He went quiet again, the kind of quiet where pride and guilt wrestle. After a long pause, he said something different. She thought you'd never actually take anything back. There it was again. That assumption, I tilted my head slightly. Why would she think that? He hesitated. Because you always forgive. That one landed differently, not as insult, as truth. I nodded slowly. Forgiveness is not permission, I said gently. It's a gift, and gifts can stop. He looked down at his coffee cup untouched. She thinks you're trying to control us. I shook my head slightly. No, I'm removing myself. There's a difference. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said very softly, she wanted everything in my name eventually. The condo, the car, all of it. I didn't react outwardly, but inside confirmation. And you? I asked. He hesitated. I thought it made sense. For stability, that word almost made me sigh. Stability built on assumption is not stability, I replied calmly. He looked at me differently then, not angry, not defensive, just thinking. What do you want? He asked finally. That question surprised me. I hadn't expected it. I sat back and considered it honestly. Respect, I said, clarity and distance if necessary. His expression softened slightly. Are we on our own now? He asked quietly. I held his gaze steadily. Yes, not cruel, not loud, just truth. He nodded slowly. No arguing, no dramatic reaction, just a small nod. I stood up and walked to the shelf. I picked up the gift again and placed it gently in front of him. This wasn't cheap, I said quietly. He looked at it for a long moment, then he swallowed and whispered, almost ashamed, I know. I didn't smile, I didn't cry. I simply nodded once, because here's what he was finally starting to understand. Losing the car was inconvenient. Losing easy access was stressful, but losing unquestioned support, that's what changes people. And the next thing I was about to reveal to him would make this feel small. Have you ever held a truth in your mouth and waited for the right second to let it out? That's what I was doing as he sat there, staring at the gift like it suddenly weighed more than it had the night before. He kept looking at it, then at me, then back down again. I could see the thinking happening, the pieces rearranging. Good, let him think, let him sit in it. I don't rush lessons anymore. When you rush, people blame emotion. When you wait, they see pattern. He finally cleared his throat. She didn't think you'd ever pull back like this, he said quietly. I nodded once. That was her first mistake. He swallowed. What's the second? He asked. I leaned back slowly. Believing I didn't understand what she was planning. His head lifted slightly. There it was, confusion, then concern. What do you mean? He asked. I studied his face carefully. I needed to know if he truly didn't know or if he was pretending. I heard the recording, I said gently. His entire posture changed, shoulders stiff, eyes alert. What recording? He asked quickly, so he didn't know. Interesting. I held his gaze, the one where she said I wouldn't notice, the one where she talked about moving west once everything was in your name. Silence, real silence this time, not defensive, not dismissive, just stunned. That's not, he started, then stopped, because he couldn't finish that sentence honestly. I watched the realization settle over him like cold air. She said that, he whispered. I nodded once, no anger in my expression, no drama. Just truth. He leaned back in his chair slowly, like something inside him had shifted off balance. She told me it was just future planning, he said softly. She said you were too sentimental to handle business decisions. Sentimental. That word again, I almost smiled. And what did you believe? I asked. He hesitated. I thought it made sense to separate things eventually. There it was, that quiet admission, not betrayal, but weakness. Weakness can do just as much damage. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't accuse, I simply asked, separate from who? He didn't answer right away because he knew the answer was me. I stood up and walked to the window. The street outside was calm, life moving forward like nothing had happened. That's the thing about personal earthquakes, the world doesn't shake with you. I'm not angry, I said softly, still facing the window. I'm awake. He didn't respond. I turned back toward him. There's something else you should know, I continued calmly. His eyes lifted again, cautious now. The condo trust was structured differently than you assumed. His eyebrows pulled together. What do you mean? I walked back to the table and placed a folder in front of him. I had prepared it last night, not dramatically, just carefully. Majority ownership was always retained, I explained. I never transferred full control. He opened the folder slowly. I watched his eyes move across the page. Legal language doesn't lie, so it was never fully mine, he asked quietly. No, I replied. It was shared under my protection. He leaned back again, stunned. She thought, I know what she thought, I interrupted gently. That paperwork didn't matter. Silence fell between us again. This time it wasn't heavy, it was educational. I let him sit in that truth, let him understand that assumptions are dangerous when they involve assets and intentions. He finally looked up at me, and for the first time since he walked in, there was no defensiveness, just vulnerability. I didn't know, he said softly, and I believed him. That was the part that hurt the most. Not that he plotted, but that he drifted into someone else's vision without checking the foundation. I exhaled slowly. I'm not taking the condo, I said calmly. His head snapped up slightly. You're not? No, I replied, but I needed you to understand that I could. That sentence sat in the air between us, not as threat as reality. He stared at the paperwork again. So what happens now? He asked quietly. I folded my hands together. Now, I said gently, you decide who you want to build stability with and on what terms. He swallowed. I could see the weight settling in his chest. Responsibility looks heavy when you've never had to carry it fully. I leaned forward slightly. I didn't take the car to punish you, I said. I took it to wake you up. His eyes met mine again. And this time there was no argument, only understanding. But here's the part he didn't expect yet, because I wasn't finished adjusting the balance. And the next decision I was about to make wouldn't hurt them financially, it would test them emotionally. Have you ever realized that the strongest move isn't taking something away, but giving it back on your own terms? That's what I was thinking as he sat there, still holding the paperwork like it might disappear if he blinked too hard. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, just aware, and awareness humbles people. I watched him breathe slowly, processing everything. So you're not taking the condo? He asked again, almost like he needed to hear it twice. I shook my head gently. No. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Oh, that sound almost softened me. Almost, but I stayed steady. I don't want to own something that feels heavy, I continued calmly. If you live there, it should feel like yours, fully, without confusion. He blinked. Then why show me all this? He asked quietly. I held his eyes, because clarity changes behavior. Silence settled again. But this time it wasn't tense, it was reflective. I stood up slowly and walked to the drawer near the fridge. I pulled out a sealed envelope and placed it on the table in front of him. He looked at it cautiously. What's that? He asked. Transfer documents, I replied simply. His eyebrows pulled together. Transfer, I nodded once. Full ownership, signed, notarized, clean. He stared at me like I had just said something impossible. Why would you do that? He asked, genuinely confused. I leaned back in my chair and gave him the honest answer. Because I don't want leverage, I want peace. That sentence seemed to land differently, not dramatic, not sharp. Just final. He slowly opened the envelope and skimmed the first page. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from realization. You're giving it to us? He asked softly. Yes, I replied. But not because you expected it. He looked up, and that's when I added the part that mattered. I'm giving it because I refuse to hold on to things to feel powerful. He swallowed hard. Mom, he started but didn't finish. I raised my hand gently. Listen carefully, I said calmly. The car was about boundaries, this is about closure. He blinked slowly. Closure, I nodded. When someone believes you're emotional and weak, the easiest response is to become cold and cruel. I won't do that. He stared at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. But understand this, I continued, my voice steady. After today, you are fully responsible, not partially, not comfortably. Fully, he nodded slowly. I could see it settling in him. The weight, the independence, the reality that there would be no safety net disguised as generosity anymore. He folded the documents carefully and placed them back in the envelope. She doesn't deserve this, he said quietly. I paused at that. Interesting, that was the first time he separated himself from her behavior. This isn't about deserving, I said softly. It's about me choosing who I am. We sat there in silence again, not awkward, not strained, just honest. He looked tired but clearer. She left this morning, he said suddenly. I blinked once. Left, he nodded slowly. Packed a suitcase, said she needed space. I didn't react outwardly. Inside I felt something settle, not victory, not relief, just inevitability. Did she say where? I asked gently. He shook his head. No, we both sat with that for a moment. Funny how quickly confidence fades when assumptions collapse. He ran his hands over his face. I didn't know it was this serious, he whispered. I leaned forward slightly. Disrespect is always serious, I replied calmly. He nodded slowly. Then he looked at me differently, not as someone to argue with, not as someone to manage, but as someone solid. Are we okay? He asked quietly. That question carried more weight than anything else he'd said. I studied him for a long moment before answering. We are honest, I said gently. That's better than okay. His eyes softened. There was no dramatic hug, no tears. Just understanding, and understanding is quieter than people expect. He stood up slowly, envelope in hand. Thank you, he said, and this time it sounded real, not automatic, not polite, real. I nodded once. You're on your own now, I said softly. Not as a threat, not as punishment, as truth. Independence isn't abandonment, it's adulthood. He didn't argue, he didn't plead, he just nodded and walked toward the door. Before stepping out, he paused. I'm sorry about Christmas, he said without turning around. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was, late but real. I know, I replied quietly. The door closed gently behind him. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the silence of my own house. No buzzing phone, no tension, just stillness. And here's what surprised me most, I didn't feel powerful, I felt free. Because giving back control on my own terms felt stronger than taking anything away. But there was still one thing left that needed to be understood, and it had nothing to do with cars or condos or paperwork at all. Have you ever realized that the smallest object in a room can carry the heaviest meaning? After he left, after the door clicked shut and the quiet settled again, I didn't go back to the paperwork. I didn't check my phone. I didn't replay the recording. I walked straight to the shelf by the window. The gift was still there, untouched since I placed it back. Morning light was falling across it gently, like nothing dramatic had ever happened. I picked it up slowly and held it in both hands. It felt warm from the sunlight, steady, ticking, always ticking. Funny, isn't it? Time keeps moving whether people respect you or not, whether they value you or not. Whether they laugh at you or not, it keeps moving. I sat down in my reading chair and let out a long sigh. Sigh not of sadness, not even relief, just reflection. When she called it cheap, I think she saw price, that's all. Something without a logo, without shine, without a brand name attached, but what she didn't see was history, effort, intention. She didn't see the months I spent restoring it, the care I took choosing something meaningful instead of flashy. She didn't see that I wasn't giving an object, I was offering connection. And connection is invisible to people who measure value in currency. I traced the edges gently with my thumb. I remembered my father adjusting it carefully every year. I remembered how proud he was of small, well-made things. If it lasts, he used to say, it's worth more than what it costs. Oh, that memory almost made my eyes sting again, but this time I didn't cry because something had shifted. I used to think being generous meant proving love, that if I gave enough, supported enough, forgave enough, I would be respected naturally. I see now how naive that was. Respect isn't automatic, it's taught. And sometimes it's enforced quietly. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a moment. The house was silent except for that soft ticking. I thought about Christmas dinner again, the laugh, the drop, my son's silence. It doesn't hurt the same way anymore. It feels distant, smaller, not because it didn't matter, but because I chose to matter more. That's the difference. You see, taking the BMW back wasn't about humiliation. Removing access wasn't about revenge. Showing him the paperwork wasn't about fear. And transferring ownership wasn't about surrender. It was about balance. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was acting intentionally. That's power, not loud power, not dramatic power, quiet power, the kind that doesn't need applause. I stood up and walked to the window. The street outside looked normal, neighbors walking dogs, cars passing by. No one knew the shift that had happened inside these walls, and that's okay. The strongest changes are rarely public. My phone buzzed once on the table behind me. I didn't rush to check it. For once, urgency didn't control me. I finished my tea slowly before picking it up, a message from my son. She's not coming back, it read. I stared at it for a moment. No anger, no surprise, just confirmation. I typed back one sentence. Then focus on who you are without her. I didn't add anything else. Some lessons need space to grow. I placed the phone down again and looked at the gift in my hand. I smiled faintly. Cheap, she had said. Haha, if only she understood. It wasn't cheap, it was enduring. And so was I. I walked to the bookshelf and placed it inside a small glass case I had bought years ago but never used. It fit perfectly. Morning light touched it gently through the window. It didn't need polishing. It didn't need validation. It just needed care. That's when it hit me fully. This was never about a car. It was never about money. It was about dignity. Dignity is quiet. It doesn't scream at dinner tables. It doesn't argue in front of guests. It waits, it watches, and when it moves cleanly. I stepped back and looked at the shelf. The gift sat there, steady and proud, not hidden. Not thrown, protected. I felt something settle deep in my chest. Peace, maybe, or clarity, maybe both. And for the first time since Christmas night, I didn't replay the moment of humiliation. I replayed the moment I decided not to stay small. That was the real turning point. But there was still one final truth I needed to say out loud, not to them, but to myself. Have you ever reached a point where you stop needing anyone to understand you because you finally understand yourself? That's where I found myself a few days after everything settled. No more urgent messages. No more tense phone calls, just quiet mornings and slow evenings. The house felt different, not empty, just honest. I woke up early, made my tea, and sat by the window where the light hits first. The gift rested inside its glass case, ticking softly like it always had, steady, reliable, unbothered by opinions. I used to think peace came after apologies, after dramatic reconciliations. After someone saying, "You were right," but that's not true. Peace comes when you stop waiting for those things. My son called that afternoon. His voice sounded calmer, softer. "I've been thinking," he said. I didn't interrupt. "I should have said something that night," he continued quietly. There it was again, not defensive, not pressured, just truth. "Yes," I replied gently. Silence followed, but this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt mature. "I didn't realize how much I relied on you," he admitted. That sentence meant more than any apology. Reliance without appreciation is blindness, and blindness can be cured, but only when someone opens their eyes. "You're capable," I told him. "You just got comfortable." He didn't argue that. Instead, he said something that surprised me. "I'm looking at things differently now." Growth doesn't arrive loudly. It comes in small sentences like that. We didn't talk about the car. We didn't talk about the business account. We didn't even talk about her. We talked about responsibility, about independence. about building something that doesn't depend on someone else's safety net. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was speaking to a man, not a boy avoiding discomfort. When we ended the call, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt balanced. That's the word, balanced. Later that evening, I stood in front of the shelf again. I watched the light fade slowly across the glass case. The ticking continued, steady as ever. I smiled softly. I used to think strength meant holding on tightly, to assets, to control. To leverage, but strength is knowing when to release, when to draw a boundary, when to say, quietly and without anger, you're on your own now. Not as punishment, not as rejection, but as recognition. Recognition that everyone eventually must stand on their own decisions. I picked up my small notebook from the table and opened it. I've started writing again, little reflections, lessons I don't want to forget. Here's one I wrote that night. Never confuse kindness with obligation. I underlined it twice because that's what happened. I confused generosity with permanence. I assumed love guaranteed respect. It doesn't. Respect is built through accountability, through speaking up, through action when silence is mistaken for weakness. I walked to the kitchen and rinsed my cup. The house hummed quietly around me. No tension, no waiting for the next message, just stillness, and stillness feels powerful when it's chosen. I don't know if she will come back into his life. I don't know if he'll rebuild something different. That's his journey now. I don't manage it anymore. I don't finance it. I don't silently protect it. That chapter closed the moment the BMW left that driveway. And here's the part people don't talk about enough. Reclaiming your dignity doesn't make you cruel. It makes you clear. I didn't yell. I didn't insult. I didn't embarrass anyone publicly. I made one call. I adjusted access. I showed paperwork. I transferred ownership. I stepped back. Clean, simple, final. If you've ever felt dismissed at your own table, if you've ever smiled through disrespect because you didn't want to cause a scene, let me tell you something softly. You don't have to explode to be powerful. You can whisper, you can adjust, you can remove access quietly. And if stories like this remind you that quiet strength matters, make sure you're subscribed. There are more conversations we don't have often enough, and they deserve to be heard. I turned off the lights one by one and stood for a moment in the dim glow from the window. The ticking continued, always ticking. I touched the glass gently and smiled. You're on your own now, I whispered again. But this time I wasn't talking about them. I was talking about myself, and for the first time in years that didn't feel lonely. It felt free.